Welcome to Missions Life, where we share resources and encouragement for current missionaries, future missionaries, and those praying for missionaries. Missions can be hard, and we want to help you face the challenges of life, leadership, and ministry. We want your life to bear fruit for the gospel wherever you are. I'm Kyle Ferran, here with my co-host and wife, Heather. Welcome to the Missions Life podcast. Today we have with us Tod Bolsinger. Tod has his MDiv and a PhD in theology and is the co-founder and principal of AE Sloan Leadership Incorporated, which is an executive coaching and consulting firm that works with church, nonprofit, university, and marketplace leaders in leading change. He's also the executive director of the Dupree Center Church Leadership Institute and associate professor of leadership formation at Fuller Theological Seminary. Before his educational career, he served as a pastor for 27 years, and Tod is the author of 9 books, including Canoeing the Mountains, Christian Leadership in the Uncharted Territory, and Tempered Resilience, How Leaders Are Formed in the Crucible of Change, and also the Practicing Change series. And we were really excited about this conversation today with Tod on the topic of resilience. And we recently heard a statistic that 50% of missionaries return to the States in their first term of service. And a majority of those were for preventable reasons. And one of those preventable reasons is unmet expectations. And whether it's in the first term of missionary service or the 10th term, missionaries are going to need to overcome unmet expectations and setbacks and challenges. And in the path of missions and leadership, we often face a lot of obstacles, problems, and resistance. And how are we going to handle those? And so first, we may welcome some of those challenges at first. It may be exciting, but as the months and the years go by, the same challenges can wear us down. And we believe that resilience is a huge factor in helping people press on. So we're excited to have you on the show, Tod. So welcome.
Well, nice to be with both of you. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, definitely. We've been able to go through some of your leadership books, the Canoeing the Mountains and Tempered Resilience with our area leaders, and they've been a real blessing. And we've got some good conversation and good, helpful direction on some things. So we appreciate that you taking the time to do those. Well, we just want to start off with discussing the Tempered Resilience. Can you just give us maybe a why behind the book and just share just a brief overview of the book as well?
Yeah, so in 2015, like 10 years ago, I published Canoeing the Mountains, which is really a book about how do you lead change? How do you lead when the world in front of you is totally different than the world behind you? And I wrote that book because I had a lot of seminary-trained graduate pastors say to me, seminary didn't prepare me for this. Like I got into being a pastor thinking it would be I'd mostly get to preach and pray and hang out with people and talk about Jesus. And I ended up doing all these things, especially navigating a changing world that I just don't feel prepared for. And so I wrote Canoeing the Mountains as a way of talking about healthy, adaptive change. And then what happened is as I started going literally around the world talking about it, people kept coming up to me saying, hey, could you talk about that chapter on sabotage? There's a whole chapter in the book that's all on sabotage. And what we found is the most soul-sucking thing for most leaders, the biggest unmet expectation is we are ready to take on the world. We're not ready when the very people who said they'd be with us stop being with us. And so when the very people who said, hey, come lead us or come join us or come be with us as we make an impact, when those folks start throwing sand in the gears because they are anxious or worried or think we're going the wrong direction, when we experience sabotage, it's really, really daunting. And I had a district superintendent in the Methodist Church say to me, I just don't know if I have anybody who can do this. We're used to pleasing people. We're used to working with people and getting along with people. What do you do when all of a sudden you feel like everybody is against you? Or that the people you thought were going to be there against you? That became the most difficult thing. And Tempered Resilience was how to develop the resilience to face resistance. And that was because the resistance became the most soul-sucking thing for most people.
Wow, that's really good insight. Could you just give us a definition of how you would define resilience?
Yeah, so there's a definition in the book that I got from Andrew Zawley and Anne Marie Healy. They wrote a book on resilience. There's lots of books on resilience. So it was kind of bad timing, I think, especially for a book that came out right before the pandemic. So a lot of people wrote books on resilience. But their book was unique because they wrote about how do you recover from things like genocide in Rwanda? Or how do you recover if you are having your entire tourism industry built on the Great Barrier Reef and it's because of climate change, it's beginning to become desolate and it's destroying an industry. And they said resilience is the capacity to, and I love this definition, maintain core purpose and integrity in the face of dramatically changed circumstance. Maintain core purpose and integrity. And I realize that really is the issue for most of us. It's core purpose. This is our mission. And it's integrity. This is our values. And when we're in a disrupted world, in really disturbing circumstances, because we get highly anxious, feel like those are the first two things that get attacked, our mission and our values. And when we lose our mission and our values, we tend to lose our heart. And so how do you maintain core purpose and integrity in the face of dramatically changed circumstance? That's to me is what resilience is about.
That's cool. It's neat to see how you've tied those two books together and built on them through that process.
Yeah.
Well, as we're talking, to missionaries and to missionary leaders around the world, what would you name as some of the major roadblocks that hinder resilience? Some of the things that drag us down or maybe get in the way of our resilience?
Well, so there's a couple of things that we learned in doing the research. So if you look at Tempered Resilience, it really is a book on how you form resilience. So you ask the question, sometimes there's lots of famous work out there about resilience and grit and stuff like that. And it's usually described as like a character quality you've got to find within yourself. Like, how do you find the resilience to overcome your disappointment? And what we discovered is it's not about finding it, it's about forming it. And that you actually have to form it in the people. And the way you form it, first of all, and this is the biggest disappointment, is that resilience is formed in the challenge. Leaders are formed in the leading. Like I always tell people that my whole company and my whole work, the doctoral students I work with, everybody I work with every single day is somebody trying to lead change. And I say, you can't learn to lead change from a book or from a class or from a webinar or a workshop, says the guy who mostly writes books, talks about webinars and podcasts and workshops. Like the only way that you can actually learn it starts by being in the middle of it. So you literally are changed in the fire. And that's the first thing. And then once you realize that, you realize everything else comes from there. And there's some really specific things we talk about the components of the forming of what we call a tempered resilient person, which is a wise, appropriately flexible, but also appropriately resilient person who understands the things they can compromise and the things they can't.
Absolutely. Yeah, it would seem like it would be very hard to grow in your resilience if, as soon as the challenge comes, like this is too hard, I'm done. That growing those skills and growing through those resilience means you kind of have to stick into the challenge, right? Lean into those obstacles.
Yeah. So it's interesting because when I talk about this, I have to say almost every single time I talk about this, I have to say to the group of people, if you hear me say anything that sounds like "suck it up, buttercup," what'd you sign up for? Then you're missing me, because I don't actually think you form resilience, and I don't think you even inspire resilience in other people by telling them to suck it up. I think what you have to actually do is acknowledge the loss. We got into this thinking it was one thing, and now it's not. Like, you're actually, one of the big parts about what's called adaptive leadership is that adaptive leadership always is about facing losses. And so one of the things that we don't do nearly enough in most organizations is want to name the loss. We want to quickly get to yep, but there's joy. We go, yep, there's joy, but for the joy we face a cross, right? So you have to hold. So I always say the first thing we do with people is, I wrote a little blue book called Leading Through Resistance. And it's about how you take your people through their own resistance. Like, how do you deal with people who are sabotaging you or who are losing their own heart and losing their own nerve? And the answer is that you get closer to them and accompany them through it. So part of what we need is not only to acknowledge we're going to be in the work, but we also need to not do that work alone. So the best thing we can do if we're feeling like we're beginning to lose heart is find a place where I can feel safe with somebody else where I can talk about that. In Tempered Resilience, I talk about failure of nerve and failure of heart. The temptation to want to cave in on your values because of the anxiety of the group, or the temptation to become cynical. And either one of them, neither those two things lead to genuine resilience.
Very true.
When you're talking about the fact that we grow resilience by actually working at it, it just kind of reminds me of the idea of exercise. It's like you don't get a six-pack from reading a book. It's going to take some work.
But you also don't get a six-pack by doing 1,000,000 sit-ups, right?
Yeah.
There's a rhythm, right? Like you. I mean, I'm not a guy with a six-pack, but I can tell you that like anything I do, exercise-wise, my biggest problem is that I used to be captain of the wrestling team, and so I keep thinking I'm an 18-year-old who can do 2-a-days, and instead, what I realized is I actually have to develop a pattern for being able to be resilient over the long haul. That includes, and the parts we talk about in the book is a rhythm of leadership and not leadership, a rhythm of stress and rest. So that's, I didn't mean to jump in on you, but that's like one of the most important parts.
That's great. Yeah. It takes that balance of that. So I think we'll come back to that one a little bit here. You also talk about the need for just a strong sense of identity in leadership. What does that mean, and how can missionaries stay true to their identity when there's the pressures of ministry?
Yeah. Well, one of the biggest parts I notice for many people in ministry, and I work with people literally all over the world in different contexts, is if your identity is built on pleasing someone, pleasing a person, pleasing God, pleasing your parents, pleasing the organization, whoever it is, it will cave quickly. So one of the biggest parts we tell people a lot is to be genuinely resilient, you have to have an identity that is grounded in something other than your need to be successful at the mission you're doing. Like you have to have something else. Like you have to actually, and I say the example of this actually is Jesus. Like the very first time Jesus hears, "You are my beloved son in whom I'm well pleased," is at his baptism, before he's done anything. He hasn't preached a sermon. He hasn't changed water into wine. He hasn't confronted a power. He hasn't healed anybody. He hasn't done anything, right? Before he's done anything, he hears, "I'm proud of you." I mean, Eugene Peterson translates that as, "You are the pride of my life." And so I go back to leaders all the time and say, look, the first thing we got to get you clear on is you do not have to lead for God to love you. You don't have to be a missionary for God to love you. You don't have to be a minister for God to love you. Let's get really, really clear that you need to be anchored in the love of God before all of that. Because if your identity is trying to prove it out here on the field, you won't make it. You're not going to make it. Yeah.
It'll never be enough.
Yeah, it'll never be enough, right? Yeah. It's way, way too hard. So you have to have a sense that your identity is rooted in something else. And I do think part of when you talk about those 50%, I mean, in my head, I wonder how many of those folks probably discovered their vocation was a mistaken identity. Like they almost need the freedom to say, go and sell life insurance for Jesus. go and be a teacher, go and whatever it is. It's not second place, man. It's just go and do the thing you were called to do. There's this great quote by a monk named Brother David Steindale Rost. He's asked by a guy, a poet named David White, asks him, "Tell me about exhaustion." And he says, "The antidote to exhaustion is not rest. It's wholeheartedness." And he says, you are so tired because you're only half here, and half here will kill you after a while. You need to find something to which you can give your full powers. You must do something heartfelt and do it soon. And I tell a lot of leaders, we're doing whole organizational change work, like with college presidents and mission agencies and groups and folks. And I'll say, you might get in the middle of it and realize, I am not wholehearted about this change. I was for where they were in the past. I need to find something I can give my full powers to. And there needs to be a freedom in that.
That's really good.
Another topic that you mentioned is, stress and growth. When we've got that rooted identity and understand, who we are, you say stress makes a leader. Can you explain what you mean by that?
Yeah. Well, it goes back to, Kyle talking about they need to do sit-ups if you want to get abs. Like there is something about, reminding ourselves that leaders are formed in the leading. They're formed in the stress. And so in one sense, what I always think is I do think we have to talk to people about do I have a genuine sense of joy? This is really what I'm called to do. And how do I lean into it in a way that I'm growing? So we do a lot of work with leaders. We tell leaders all the time, if you want to lead change, you have got to love the learning. You got to give up being an expert, because change these days is not about being an expert. You got to overcome the expert expectation. If you love being an expert, you'll never lead change, because we live in a world where nobody knows what's coming next. It is the most disruptive time. I always tell people this is not the hardest time to ever be a pastor. It would have been way worse during the Black Plague, when 25% of the human race died. And I guarantee you, whatever we're facing is not as much as the pastor that I met with and talked with, who's from Kyiv, who had to lead Christmas Eve services and asked me to pray that there would be no drone rockets during the services so people could hear the gospel. I never once had to preach worrying about bombs going off in my sanctuary. But this is probably the most complex time. And we have so little expertise that if you don't love learning, and to me, the big stress is the stress of feeling like I don't know what is next. I'm going to have to learn as I go. I'm going to have to feel humbled. I'm going to make mistakes. Somebody described fail as frequent attempts in learning, right? You've got to love learning, right? And that to me is one of the big stressors. If you love that, then you can grow. If you don't love that, if you don't like the stress of that, it's going to be hard. It's going to be really hard.
Yeah. I think that you mentioned that idea of the being the expert, and that was, as I first came into leadership, that was kind of an idea I'd had of I needed to be the expert.
Oh, yeah.
And that was very quickly dislodged because I realized I was not the expert on things. But learning more of going through some coaching training was really, really helpful to just not only be able to coach others, but just to be able to coach myself through change and be like, okay, how are we going to work? How are we going to walk through this? And realizing that instead of being, as a leader, having to be like the expert or the answer guy, that it's more of a question guy of hey, let's work through this change. Let's what questions do we need to ask to be able to adapt and change and be able to meet the challenges that are coming towards us? Because we work with people in 8 countries, and I don't know all the answers to those 8 countries. I can't. Yeah, it's impossible. And so, but it's so freeing to be able to say, all right, well, let's find the answers and let's work towards that, and not feel like we have to be the expert in everything, which I think was an older style of leadership that was just boom, hey, here's the answer, and they were the go-to person on everything. And so it's taken a little while to undo that idea in our head.
Well, good for you. Oh my gosh, I'm older than you, so it probably took me a lot longer, because for me, I was asked to be an expert. I was asked to be a leader because I was an expert. You're a really, really good preacher, so be our pastor. As if those two things had anything to do with each other. Right? Like I said, I'm pretty good at 3 points in a poem. I wasn't very good with people, and so I had to work on that one. Right? So, very, very often, one of the parts we talk a lot about is leaders are formed in the leading. And that usually means you get asked to lead right after you were good at something that was not leading. I ran a program, I could raise money, or I'm a good preacher, I'm a good teacher. I didn't have to lead any change. I just had to show up, and people took my expertise. Leadership is literally where you have to do what you just described, Kyle, which is where you have to stand in front of a group of people and they say, so what do you think we should do? And you have to say, I don't know. Psychologists say that's the 3 hardest words for a human to say. Harder than I love you, I'm sorry, and I forgive you is I don't know. That's interesting.
And I can see how easily that ties back to what you were just talking about, identity.
Right.
If your identity, and come on, missionaries, we have to write prayer letters back home proving our worth. We kind of get wrapped up in this idea of our identity is kind of what other people are expecting us to do. Yet if leadership is trying and failing and trying again and getting back up and bringing those people along with you, if our identity is rooted in pleasing people, that's not going to go so well. That just will not fly very long with, this a definition of, stress and leadership and the growth that comes out of sometimes failure.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. You said it really well. I really appreciate that.
Yeah, it's really formed there in our identity. Won't succeed if we don't reform that identity. Next question there was just about resilience and rest. We kind of touched on this a little bit ago about the you can't just do a million sit-ups. You talked about the rhythms of stress and rest to build that resilience. What are some ways that missionaries and leaders can find that healthy rhythm of rest and work?
So it's interesting you said this, because I wrestled with using the word rest. And so what I ended up saying was a rhythm of leading and not leading.
Okay.
And I do think rest is a hugely important part of it. But most of us think, I can't tell you how many leaders I know came through the pandemic and said, now all I need is a sabbatical. And their only rhythm for figuring out how they're going to face whatever's in the future is, I just got to make sure I keep getting sabbaticals. So rest is part of it. But the other part you need is you need to be able to be doing some things that remind you of what you love and what you're good at. And, so I'll give an example. When we talk about leadership, we talk about what's called adaptive leadership. Adaptive leadership is how you lead when there are no best practices, when you're not the expert, right? When you have to disappoint people, you got to take them through loss, right? You got to name competing values, and everybody wants the competing value to be resolved in a win-win solution. Can we just all agree? And the answer is usually not, right? If you're facing the Rocky Mountains and you're a canoeer, you're going to have to drop the canoes. And if you came on the trip because you're an expert canoeer, it's a bad day. Now you're just a dude who carries luggage. You're no longer an expert canoeer. And so you realize that this is really hard. So I tell people, one of the things you need in your life is some places where you get to please people. Right? Some things where you get filled up again. So I just give this really silly example, and I can do this because I'm 60 and my kids are grown. But like, one of the things I love to do, if I've been spending all my day working with leaders going through change, is cook my wife dinner. And people go, oh, that's very sweet. I go, it's very sweet, but you know why? Even if it's mediocre, she loves it. She thanks me. She's happy, right? She's happy. She thanks me. Like, oh my gosh, like making someone happy in my life is as important as taking a nap or taking a Sabbath, because I spend so much of my time having to work with people going through disappointment. So I talk a lot about the rhythm of leading and not leading, the rhythm of stress and rest. There's a rhythm to it that you need, which is why you can't always just be pressing on. And which is one of the reasons why, even you talked about the prayer letters you guys have to write back. The prayer letters are always all the things we've done. And if you get to the end, and I used to have to write them. I was a missionary with Youth for Christ. And I remember I had to write these letters. And if I felt like the statistics weren't really good this month, I'd have to talk about how busy I was doing stuff. And I rarely get to say something like, I spent most of this month praying about how hard it is to reach kids these days. And I don't have an answer.
Yeah. Do you have another example that might come to mind about, someone else who's chosen a rhythm of leading and not leading, just, to give our listeners some ideas?
Well, one of the things that I do is I know I spend a lot of my time in offices, on Zoom calls, on planes, in airports, in rooms with people. So I got to get outside. I literally got to get outside. So I build into my life a rhythm of getting outside as much as I possibly can. And it's really weird. I'll say that, I know that if I don't get outside and play in nature, I will lose my heart after a while. And so it seems like, oh, well, okay, everybody needs to have a balanced life. It's true. But as for those of us who are struggling with burnout, most of the time, it's not because we're weak. It's not because we're not tough enough. It's because we got this little voice in our head that is sitting there saying to us all the time, don't just stand there, do something. What's burning us out is the demand, not that we're so weak. It's that we're actually getting brittle. And so what I actually have to do is tell myself stuff like, cooking dinner for my wife is not going to change the world, but it's going to probably keep me in the fight, right? having time with my big 100-pound Bernese Mountain Dog out in the snow where she's playing, it's going to make my life better. Sitting with my feet in a trout stream, taking a hike in the woods. Here I live in New York. I literally made sure that our apartment was close to Central Park and Riverside Park, so that every day we're at one of the parks that I'm home, and every weekend I'm taking a long walk in the woods, even in a place like Manhattan. It's like I know what restores my soul, and I have to make myself believe that that's important, because usually the thing that's burning me out it's that I'm putting too much on me.
Yeah. I have to schedule I call it my wilderness time.
There you go.
From Jesus's time, where he would often go away to the wilderness to by himself to pray.
Yeah.
And so that's been important for me. I see the same thing. If I don't have that, I do notice it very quickly.
I think I notice it quicker.
Yeah, my wife.
Exactly. Like, probably so, right? Probably so.
And I'm like, can't you go out and take a hike or ride your motorcycle today?
Yeah. There's this Japanese theologian named Kiyoma. Oh, I'm so sorry. He wrote a book called The 3 Mile an Hour God.
Oh, yeah.
And he talked about the fact that Jesus walked everywhere. Well, you start realizing that's a lot of just built-in rhythm of, I just bet he just took a long walk and said to Peter, "Shh, I don't need you saying, please don't, just shh." Right?
Yeah, but do you hear that? Okay, yeah, be quiet.
Yeah.
Exactly.
That's good.
Well, thanks for sharing those. Let's talk about learning from mistakes. So, as we kind of mentioned, anytime we're leading through change, we're going to have to try new things, and there's going to be failures. What can we do when we find ourselves making mistakes, or how do mistakes play a part in building resilience?
So this is the part. So I have a PhD, so this is the research nerdy part of this whole thing. One of the things we learned is the most resilient people are the people who learn. So the first reframe they make in their mind is you stop asking, did it work? You ask, so what am I learning? You capture learnings. So we do this actually as a company. We tell people to do this. Organizations going through change. Get a whiteboard and make a goal that you have 50 learnings in a year. You're going to learn at least one thing every week. You get a week off for Christmas and Easter. You don't have to learn anything, but you have to. And every time you learn something, put it on the board. Just put it on the board. You will find that the momentum of learning actually keeps you in it longer. So one of the coaches in my company, she has pretty aggressive breast cancer, and she's a single mom. She's got a teenage girl who she adopted. So imagine this girl who's been adopted, the only mom she's ever known has breast cancer, and she's a teenager. And so they put a whiteboard up, and they started saying, we're going to learn everything we can through going through cancer. And here's the first thing she learned. When people send me flowers, I'm happy, and my daughter feels neglected. If you send us a DoorDash gift card so I can order ice cream, we're both happy.
Ah, there you go.
Right? So she literally put out a note to her friends saying, please, every time you think you want to send me flowers, send me a card, send me a gift card so I can buy ice cream for me and my daughter, because that reminds her that she's loved. And when she feels loved, I am more resilient to face this cancer. That learning keeps you going. So what we say to people is, understand that learning is actually turbocharging you toward to stay in it. When we feel mostly burned out is when it feels futile. Like, I'm stuck here. There's nothing I can get out of this. And when we start telling ourselves stuff like, I'm sure there's a lesson in here somewhere, we actually don't do very well. But when we actually say stuff like here's one thing I learned. Here's one thing I learned. So we just say over and over again, what do you learn? What do you learn? What do you learn? We have an entire process in our little book called How Not to Waste a Crisis. It's really teaching people that you get through crisis by taking people through learning.
It's good. It's and just changing that, reframing that process too helps to put a positive angle on it, so that it changes how we look at things.
Yeah. Well, it'd take out a lot of the fear, I think, then. If we're constantly looking for, all right, what are we learning? What are we learning? Your mistakes aren't rooted in something scary.
Yeah. It really is. It's an opportunity to learn again. And that becomes pretty cool.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yep. I remember that talked about that, and I think it was in the book, I think the Oz Principle, where it just talked about the idea of looking at what can we learn through each experience, and even just reframing that helps teams to not be battling against each other, and also to not get discouraged, but just be like, all right, what are we learning through this? How can we grow and adapt? And
Yeah.
so that's just a good
Well,
process.
once you take a mistake, throw it on a whiteboard with a team and create a learning substance in it, it automatically kind of depersonalizes
Yeah.
the problem, and we can, move forward. What was funny, what I just thought of, we do this with our children. We recognize mistakes. We help them learn and grow through it. I mean, even when you're talking with toddlers, learning to walk and things, and somehow as adults, we start at some point to get very uncomfortable with mistakes and our personal failures, and we
Feeling
don't
shame by them or
shame.
something.
We don't talk about them anymore. We
Yep.
don't learn from those.
Yep. I had a woman come up to me when I was a pastor, and she said, "Hey, I've been trying to bring my neighbor to church for years. They don't go to church. Our kids play in the cul-de-sac. Their kids, finally, I said, hey, your kids probably like our Sunday school. It's really fun for kids. Would you guys want to come as a family?" And they came. And she goes, "Hey, and you know what's weird? I saw our Sunday school through the eyes of a people who've never been to church. Oh my gosh, all the things now I could see." I said, "Would you do me a favor? Would you be willing to lead a discussion and maybe lead a team where we could change everything to make the church, the Sunday school, just really more, friendly for people who've never been to church?" And she goes, "This is why I hate this church." And I went, "What?" She goes, "You can't come up with a solution without having someone ask you to be you can't come up with a problem without having someone expect you to be the solution. Like you get volunteered if you give an idea. Like, I hate this." I said, "I kind of think that's how the Holy Spirit works though, right?" She goes, "Well, then what do we pay you for?"
You're the expert, right?
Well, exactly. Well, and I said I didn't have an answer. I got totally flooded. I just mumbled something, "Peace be with you," and I walked away. And now I do. Actually, I now have an answer. If anybody ever says that to me again, you feel free to use it. My answer is, you pay me to stand here and take that from you. Because what you needed probably is a moment to realize my invitation was probably the Spirit's invitation for you. God gave you eyes to see. God gave you like our leadership isn't about having it all perfectly figured out. It's about inviting people into the thing that will transform them. And so much of what we have to do in leadership that takes us out of burnout is acknowledging that when we are faking it till we make it, we don't make it. We actually have to invite people into a process of learning. And that little red book, How Not to Waste a Crisis, it takes people through a process that starts with, don't default back to the answer you think is right. Instead, go through a process as a team where you get curious, and we have a whole step-by-step process that we use with every group we work with on how to go from observations to interpretations to questions to interventions. And the interventions are small prototypes, we call them. And that fuels, that process of learning helps people get wholehearted again. Because I may not be perfect and I might not have it all worked out. This might not have been what I expected, but man, it's not wasted. It's not futile.
Yeah. It removes that inner voice of you're not enough, you can't make it. And that's often the thing that takes people out of the game. It's just that little inner voice that is nagging at us that, yeah, you're not going to make it. You can't do it. You don't have enough. And so that just reframing that voice, giving it a new message, reframes all the problems into something different. It's like you say, it's not a problem, it's a learning, and that changes your challenges into opportunities because it's now a learning opportunity and a way to grow. So
yeah,
that's great. Just kind of taking a step back to look at like the why of leadership, the bigger picture. Leadership's often rooted in a sense of our calling. And any advice you give to missionaries or those leaders that are feeling disconnected from their purpose when they're facing difficulties and hard times?
Yeah. So, for several years, my job at the seminary was to be in charge of what's called vocation formation. It was forming people for a calling. That was my job. And I spent a lot of time looking at vocation. And I really begun to realize that most of the language we use around calling is not helpful because it's focused on our own passion. You'll hear stories like, if you love what you do, you'll never work a day in your life, or find out what you're passionate about and do that. And there's famous speeches by Steve Jobs saying that. And what people pointed out that is that if Steve Jobs had done that, he would have been like the most popular yoga teacher in Palo Alto. It's that he was really passionate about. It's really not about your passion. It's really about what place in the world that you connect to that's in pain.
Hmm.
Like getting really clear on, of all the problems or all the things that I could contribute to, what's the place of pain in the world? What's the problem I most want to work on? And people who have more resilience are clear, this is mine to do.
Hmm.
And it's mine to do because it fits who I am. So when we have this little book called Invest in Transformation, we think it's really how transformation comes out of getting really clear personally and organizationally on who you are, your identity, your gifts, what the Catholics call charism, like the unique thing that is you. And then what in the world is calling for your name? And I always like to point out to people, if you look at the New Testament, there was a whole bunch of people who pressed in on Jesus, who called after Jesus, who wanted Jesus to do stuff. And he just had this incredible capacity to go, this one, go to the Sea of Bethsaida, go to the pool of Bethsaida, pick one guy out, right? All the people pressing on him. Wait, power went out from me. Who touched me? What do you mean? Everybody's touching you. No, 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 no. Oh, the woman with the issue of blood. She's been bleeding for 13 years. That's the one. Like it becomes this place where more and more we ask ourselves, so what's the thing that I'm really called to work on? And it can't be about making anybody else happy. It's got to call your name. And I think once you realize this is who I am, and this is why I think I'm called to this, and here's the pain, here's the way I can contribute to what God wants to do in the world. God's got the whole church, doesn't need me to do everything. Like I tell people all the time, there's an old rabbinic tale that says when God judges you, he will not ask you why you weren't Moses. He'll ask you why you weren't you. He already had a Moses. And so what is yours to do? And I think the more you focus on the problem and the pain of the world, rather than, and a particular thing, it can be a very small thing, right? The more you focus on that, the bigger input you can have. I mean, one of the examples I sometimes use in the United States is, Jimmy Carter was controversially not the best president, according to most historians, not the best president. He had one term, voted out of office, all that stuff. But in his retirement, he eliminated the guinea worm. Like people don't die of guinea worm anymore. I never even heard of the guinea worm, but this little thing was tormenting the global South. And his legacy of lots of things he's done. He's a genius man in lots of ways. He had the most amazing post-presidency. But there are very few people dying of guinea worm today. Like I was able to be like, what's your guinea worm? What's the thing that is yours to do? And maybe it'll be different things in different times, but it's usually more built around this is calling my name and it's mine to do. It's my small contribution to the kingdom.
Yeah,
it's been interesting in our life, ministry-wise, the different things that God's kind of laid on our hearts that we would often start praying, hey, Lord, would you send someone to do this? And generally the answer is, yes, I will, and it'll be you. Even if we were busy doing something else that was, or going in a different direction, that God really worked that way to lay those big things on our hearts, and then worked out all the details to be able to move us in that direction.
Yeah.
And so that's just been neat to see how he's done that.
Well, and I have to tell you, the other side is I remember things like when I was a pastor, or especially I was leading a young adult group, it felt like every 6 months I was losing a worship leader, like somebody would graduate or leave. And I'd think, okay, God, should I pick up the guitar? I played a few chords. I could probably do it. I should lead worship. And more often I'd have God say to me, no, because there's somebody else that's theirs to do. You need to do the thing I've told you to do. So you're going to have about 6 weeks of really bad worship because we don't have anybody with a guitar. And then someone who really needs to do that is going to pull that up. Like it's as much saying yes and saying no at the same time.
Yeah,
it's really good.
And I can definitely see how being very clear on what it is that we can do personally, that what's our space to fill, so to speak.
I love our space to fill. I love that, Heather. I love that phrase. That's great.
Could really keep you energized through those up and downs.
Yep. Part of it, when you think about, I kind of keep coming back to 50% of the people who went on the mission field are leaving, and mostly it's from causes that could have been addressed. How much of it was unrealistic expectations of something that wasn't reality.
Yeah.
Like what would happen if we said, hey, our whole goal is for 50% of you to go home because you're going to actually find out what you're called to do. And the other 50% are going to be more called than ever. So if we can get that to 50%, we can get 50% of you to go home and tell good stories about being on the mission field, that would be okay, because the other 50% of you are going to be really deeply called. That reframe alone might change some stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, this kind of leads right into a question we have on, then sustaining hope. What can we do to maintain that hope when progress feels really slow?
Well, for one thing, this is where the scriptures help me a lot. I asked to get asked to speak on occasion. I basically got one skill, which is talking. I don't really can't do anything else. I can cook an okay dinner for my wife, but I basically talk. So, you get asked every time you get asked to do like a baccalaureate at a high school, or they give you like Jeremiah 29:11, for I know the plans I have for you, says the Lord, plans to give you hope and a future, right? They never give you the rest of the chapter, which is, and because of that, I'm going to come back in 70 years when you're dead and when your kids are dead. So you plant gardens, build homes, seek the peace of the city that I've sent you. Make the world better for them right where you are. And then I will come back and get your grandkids. I think part of what we need hope is to remind ourselves that hope is always, if it's genuine hope, it's always bigger than one lifetime. And I think a lot of what we have to do is have more and more of a perspective that is a biblical perspective, that God is sovereign, and my hope is not in myself, but is in the God who will accomplish things much further than my own life. And that's the only way that I can have hope. So I'll give my little bit of work. Leo Tolstoy said, add my light to the sum of light. I'll do the thing that I'm called to do. And I always tell, I work with church leaders, and I say, my goal isn't to make sure your church doesn't die. All of Paul's churches are dead, but we're here. So how can we be resilient? How can we be adaptive? And how can we lead a movement that is bigger than ourselves? I think hope is in that.
Absolutely.
I often find encouragement from in Paul's writings there. I think it was in Corinthians, where he was talking about his field of service and how some people had a different field, and he didn't want to go into theirs. But just being content with, we should always be looking to grow and to be used where God has us. But at the same time, that contentment with, hey, this is the field God's given us, or He's gifted us differently than other people, and He's given us different fields than other people, and so just to be content with where He's placed us and how He's gifted us can really help us in that idea of, hey, we don't have to have the mega church or the mega missions if that's not what God has for us. And to not be discouraged by that and lose hope that we don't have that perfect success idea. Sometimes God has different plans for us.
Well, and part of it, Kyle, which is so helpful, the way you said that is a weird part. I work with organizations and change. Well, one of the first things we have to do with organizations is get them to get really, really clear. If you're going to change well, you got to get clear on what you're going to preserve. The most important thing is what doesn't change. That's what so there's the pain in the world and there's what I'm going to preserve, right? Those two things come together. So partly, like, what's really weird is it's like a bad restaurant has way too many things on the menu. But if you ever go to like the best taco place, it's good at tacos, right? Like I'm from California, man. You give me a good taco place, they don't have to make anything else, man. Tacos and maybe chips, right? Like, what we have to realize is the more clear we get about the thing that's ours to do, the bigger the impact we'll make. And so if we can, because we'll also can cheer on others. Our little company, we work on one thing. We help faith leaders thrive as change leaders. That's what we work on. We work on change. We get asked, hey, will you help us do a search to find a new pastor or a new CEO? No, we don't do search, right? will you help us with conflict resolution? Because, there's a lot of conflict. And we said, we take people through conflict, but for change. We don't do conflict resolution. We don't do that. Like, we have to say no to a lot. But by saying no to a lot, we get to keep working on the thing where we get to contribute. It's like I always think sometimes like in the great big orchestra, we're just all the person with the triangle who every now and then just goes, bing, and that's all I add to the thing, right? That's us. So
That's good. That's really good. You can, like the saying goes, you can do anything, but not everything.
Yeah, absolutely.
So
absolutely.
Picking what it is you're going to be able to do. So that's really good.
Yeah.
I appreciate you sharing about the Tempered Resilience book. Another one that you've recently written was the How Not to Waste a Crisis: Quit Trying Harder. Could you share just a few points about that book and just give just a quick overview of that may be helpful for missionaries?
Yeah. So I mentioned a couple of the themes already. So we've this little book. There's 4 tiny little books. Each of them takes less than 2 hours to read. They've got they've even got cartoons in them and conversation topics and exercises. They were all built on after over 10 years of talking to people about canoeing the mountains and almost 20 years of doing this work and change. What we found is there were 4 mistakes that really good leaders kept falling into. And one of them we've just talked about is thinking you can outwork every problem. Like this is even when people read my book, Tempered Resilience, they think it's a book about it's like the resilience books done by Navy SEALs or something. That's I'm the opposite of that guy. Right? I don't think it's that at all. I think it's not about working harder. It's not about trying harder. It's about learning. It's about training differently. That's what actually keeps you going. In crisis, you learn. Crisis reveal deeper problems you've not had the will to look at. So don't miss that opportunity, and that will actually take you forward. And the other 3 books are the same way. They're about trying to please people too much. The answer isn't to please people. The answer is to get really, really clear that the mission wins, not any person. The mission wins. And it's about how do you go through resilience, right? How do you keep resilience? How do you go through resistance? And you lead people through resistance, not by being all tough and pushing back on them, but actually pulling them by with you. And then the one called Invest in Transformation is really about the fact that people think that if everybody trusts me, that's enough. And our whole point is that you can't have any transformation without trust, but trust is not transformation. Transformation actually takes the investment of trust. And what's that process that we talked about of paying attention to the places of pain in the world? So there are 4 little books, each for different groups of teams facing different challenges that they can just sit down and talk about. I said you can hand the book out on Friday, and on Monday everybody can have read it, and they only took them a couple of hours, and they can talk about it.
That's good. Those bite-sized chunks like that are really helpful to kind of keep the information in a clearly managed in our heads as well. So those are very helpful that way.
Any other practical things you can think of that you would share with missionaries just about growing in resilience?
The book Tempered Resilience uses a blacksmith metaphor. It talks about the way in which steel is turned into a tempered tool. Tempered tools are tools that are both strong and flexible because they've had a combination of heating and pounding and shaping. But the most important thing I learned, I took a blacksmithing class, is the most important thing was the anvil. The anvil, what you set the steel on. If we're the steel, the most important thing is what we're set on, and our anvil are our relationships. So I would say that one of the very best things, even for a podcast like this, is to think about who are the 3 or 4 people that I could pull together that we could listen to this podcast and then talk about, okay, so how do we help each other? How do we hold each other? And like I always say, a good leader needs a thick anvil of relationships. You need partners, mentors, and friends. You need all 3. Partners are the people who are more committed to the mission than they are to me. Like I work with a lot of people who I love, but your genuine partner, that's a person who, if you look them in the eye and go, I'm sick, or my wife's sick, or the kids are in a hard place, or I might have to go off the mission field, they will go, don't you worry. We got you. We'll keep going. They're more committed to the mission than they are to me. That's a good partner. Your friends are the people who are more committed to me than the mission. Like I need some people who are like, brother, if you don't go, I'm not going either. Like we're doing this one together. Right. And I need the people who will remind me, man, you've been on the plains way too much. Come home and just, let's go out in the woods. Right. You need partners and friends. Mentors are people who are committed to me so that I can always live out my mission. And that's where I put therapists and spiritual directors and intentional mentoring relationships and coaching. I would say that what we do as a company is we are coaches and consultants for people going through change. We're part of your anvil. But we tell them, hey, you might hire us to work with you, but who are your partners and who are your friends? We're not those. I mean, we care a lot about you. I'm working with a large church here in the United States where the pastor's got stage 4 cancer, and we're going to help him go through the process probably of dying, and his church go through the process of what that's going to be like for them as they think about the future. And I know that the best part of this man is that he is a godly man with good friends and good family and good people around him and a good team. And that I'm just one little part right there in the middle of the anvil.
That's really helpful. I mean, that'd be a fantastic exercise to sit down and think through, with our leaders and stuff.
Yeah.
You can't miss those pieces and be as strong as you think you are.
Yeah. You need it to hold you, right? Like that's the thing. Most people, I would bet that most of your 50% who are leaving are saying I'm alone. Or you've tried really hard yourself to be all three those things to people, right? Or something like that.
Yeah. Do you see a certain one area of those three that people maybe don't commonly add to their anvil? People gravitate maybe to friends, but don't have a different component.
So it depends. Actually, that's a great question, Heather. It really depends upon the area you come out of. So many agencies, many groups are like really good partners. And they'll even say, we're so close together. We're kind of like family. We're like a team. We're really friends. And what's hard is the boundary, like getting really clear on the difference between, like, I love working with people that I love. And all the people on our team, I think of them as friends. But I'm really clear that, when we're doing this work together, our work is different than our friendship. You can leave my company and we'll still be friends. But if you don't do a good job for my clients, you're not going to get to work with us, right? What most people miss is that middle one. Like the question I would always say to everybody, I said this once to a group of people. I said, if I was a bishop, and I'm not a bishop, I'm a Presbyterian. I don't even believe in bishops really. But if I was a bishop and I had spiritual authority in your life and you tried to lead anything, I don't care if it's a bake sale. If you try to lead anything without a therapist, a spiritual director, or a coach, I think that's leadership malpractice. If LeBron James needs a coach as the best basketball player in the world, or if Lionel Messi needs a coach as the best soccer player in the world, you probably need a coach for whatever you're doing. So I think the thing most people are missing is they don't have someone where they can just show up and be vulnerable and say, I need your help. I just need your help. And that can be, sometimes that's been a spiritual director. I need someone to help me pray. And I need some place where I can be honest before the Lord. I need a confessor. Sometimes that's a therapist. I need someone who helped me understand my feelings or why I feel depressed or why I'm struggling. My wife was trained as a therapist before in the early part of her life. Sometimes that's a coach or it's a mentor. I have a mentor in my life. Every month I call this person because I've never run a company before. I've run churches and nonprofits and education. I've never run a small company. And I said, I need someone to teach me how to run a good company. And he's run good companies. So he gets on a phone and calls, and we talk every month. So yeah, I think usually the mentor is the one that's missing.
Okay. That's really helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, that's really good. So on the website for the podcast here, we'll put links to all the different resources that you mentioned there. Anything else that you would like us, any other resources that you think would be good to mention at this time?
Well, you probably got a lot. I mean, if folks, the books take you there. I would say that, if you want a place to start on all this leadership stuff, I would say start with if you like history, you can start with Canoeing the Mountains. And if you really know that you've got a challenge with resilience, you can start with Temple Resilience. But the easy place is to start with the small books. Start with one of those, pull a group of people together, talk about it. There's lots of conversations written into the book and figure out where it takes you. Yeah.
It's good. Very good. Well, thank you so much
You're
for
welcome.
your time today with us. It's been really good, good content, and so I hope it's going to be a blessing to many.
Thank you. It's been really fun. God bless you in your work. I think it's really powerful.
Thank you.
Well, that's all for this show, and we want to thank you again for spending your valuable time with us today.
If you enjoyed this episode, please consider taking just a moment and giving us a great review. Your review will help people find the podcast and allow these resources to encourage more people. If you took something valuable away from this episode, please share it with someone who would enjoy it.
If you'd like to find the show notes, blog posts, and free resources for ministry and leadership, as well as some information on my book, Overflowing, visit kylefarran.com. That's KYLEFARRAN.com. Hope to see you soon on a future podcast.